But then the King of England, King Charles, decided to use his royal prerogative and lecture us on how to run our country, on how America ought to lead the world. Kingo, shut the hell up.
So Ben Shapiro just delivered a brutal takedown of King Charles lecturing America. And honestly, he's absolutely right. Britain went from global empire to economic basket case in a century through socialism, open borders, and pacifism. We're about to see exactly why America should do the opposite of everything Britain did.
See, here's the thing. There are lots of lessons to be learned from Great Britain over the past century. The biggest one is this: don't do what they did. King Charles is currently repping a civilization that no longer exists. He's an empty crown sitting atop a civilization that gave up the ghost a long time ago. There's only one takeaway Americans should have from the King's visit: that if Britain has zigged, we ought to zag. Britain is a cautionary tale. If we follow their path, we collapse the way that they have.
This is the key insight. Britain declined from controlling a quarter of the world's landmass in 1920 to needing American military protection today. GDP per capita in 1900 was nearly identical between the US and UK. Today, Americans are 40% wealthier. The numbers don't lie about failed policies.
Now, a lot of King Charles' speech was delightful. Really, truly. For example, he spoke about the bond between the United States and the UK as priceless and eternal. Here's what he had to say.
The irony is staggering. Democrats spent months calling Trump authoritarian and chanting, "No kings," then gave a standing ovation to an actual hereditary monarch. It perfectly captures progressive cognitive dissonance, opposing imaginary authoritarianism while celebrating the real thing when it validates their worldview.
Because let's be real about this. Britain has taken religion and trod it through the mud. The statistics don't lie here. According to the UK's 2022 census, 51% of people in the UK identify as having no religion. According to a 2024 British Social Attitude Survey, 9% of the population, 9% attends a religious service once a week or more. And as far as Anglican identity, it doesn't exist anymore.
Compare that to America. 76% of Americans identify as religious. 36% attend services weekly. Britain's Church of England has collapsed so completely that only 2.6% of young people identify with it. Yet they're lecturing the world's most religious developed nation on Christianity. The audacity is breathtaking.
15% of London minimum at this point is Muslim. A huge percentage of those people are radicalized. According to one survey conducted in 2016 by the Polling Exchange, 4% of British Muslims, 4% say that 9/11 was created by Al-Qaeda. 7% say the Jews. 31% say the American government. Britain imported millions of people who believe this. Millions of people. This is where your interfaith nonsense has gotten you.
These aren't fringe conspiracy theorists. These are mainstream British Muslims believing 9/11 was an inside job. When 31% blame the American government and only 4% blame Al-Qaeda, you've imported a population with fundamentally anti-Western worldviews. Mass immigration without assimilation creates parallel societies with hostile ideologies.
You know where interfaith is going in Britain? Interfaith is going to tolerance for radical Islam, which is why today, the day after King Charles visited the United States, there was an attack in Golders Green, which is a very heavily Jewish part of London, in which a radical Muslim took out a kitchen knife and just started stabbing people who were wearing Jewish garb. Here is some of the horrendous video. You can see here is a radical Muslim. He's walking down the street, takes out a knife, and literally just attacks a man wearing a yarmulke on the street. He ended up stabbing two people on the street before he was taken down by guards in Golders Green.
The timing couldn't be more symbolic. While Charles lectures America on tolerance and interfaith dialogue, his own subjects are literally stabbing Jews in London streets. This is the direct result of the interfaith nonsense and open borders policies he's promoting. Cause and effect in real time.
We should mention that the UK has destroyed its own economy on the basis of this nonsense.
Our generation must decide how to address the collapse of critical natural systems, which threatens far more than the harmony and essential diversity of nature. We ignore at our peril the fact that these natural systems, in other words, nature's own economy, provide the foundation for our prosperity and our national security.
Hey, again, listening to the Brits lecture us on energy production is ridiculous.
Britain's energy dependence perfectly illustrates their hypocrisy. They've destroyed their nuclear capacity, banned fracking, and rely on Russian gas while lecturing others about clean energy. Meanwhile, American energy independence through fracking and nuclear has made us a global powerhouse. Results speak louder than rhetoric.
And we know what went wrong for Great Britain. We know what went wrong. Even after World War I, where they had suffered extraordinary losses and where financial leadership had largely been ceded to the United States because the United States was the borrowing center for the British. Even after that, the global empire really was not America's yet. Global empire was still Great Britain's. And then they decided between World Wars I and II that they were going to become pacifists, that they were going to move away from defending themselves, their civilization. Famously in 1933, there was a resolution at Oxford University at their debate club, the so-called King and Country Resolution, in which the students voted, quote, that this House will under no circumstances fight for its king and country. And this was reflective of British sentiments. There was an attempt in the aftermath of the cost of World War I to recede from global leadership. And you know what ended up happening? It was a self-fulfilling prophecy.
That Oxford resolution was the moment British civilization chose decline. When your elite universities vote against defending their own country, you've lost the cultural confidence needed to maintain power. It's a perfect parallel to American universities today promoting anti-American sentiment among our future leaders.
It is the first volume of his Second World War series. And one of the things that Churchill writes, right near the top of the book, he says that his purpose in writing this book, which he was writing, again, right after World War II, as the rise of the Soviet Union was creating the conditions for the Cold War, he said that he was writing to demonstrate, quote, how the malice of the wicked was reinforced by the weakness of the virtuous, how the structure and habits of democratic states, unless they are welded into larger organisms, lack those elements of persistence and conviction, which can alone give security to humble masses. How even in matters of self-preservation, no policy is pursued for even 10 or 15 years at a time. We shall see how the counsels of prudence and restraint may become the prime agents of mortal danger, how the middle course adopted from desires for safety and a quiet life may be found to lead direct to the bullseye of disaster. And he says, we shall see how absolute is the need of a broad path of international action pursued by many states in common across the years, irrespective of the ebb and flow of national politics.
Churchill's warning applies directly to today's geopolitics. European prudence and restraint toward Putin, Xi, and Iran mirrors 1930s appeasement of Hitler. When democracies choose comfort over strength, they invite aggression. America's global leadership prevents the bullseye of disaster, Churchill described.
In 1942, there was something called the Beveridge Report in the middle of World War II. And it was a report arguing essentially for large-scale socialism in Great Britain. This is where the phrase cradle to grave welfare state comes from. It comes from the Beveridge Report. And after World War II, Britain embraced that in full. And what that meant was basically blowing out global leadership in favor of domestic spending and destruction of their domestic economy. At the beginning of the 20th century, for example, government in Britain spent about 0.5% of GDP on health. As of April 2026, that number is 11.4% of GDP. At the beginning of the 20th century, the British government spent about 0.7% of GDP on social protection. Today, UK welfare spending is almost 11% of GDP. In total, as of early this year, the UK's government expenditures are approximately 44 to 45% of their entire GDP annually. By way of contrast, the United States, we spend a lot of money here in the United States, it's like 22%. Britain gave up the ghost.
These numbers are devastating. Britain went from maritime empire to welfare state in 60 years. Government spending exploded from 1.2% to 45% of GDP. That's the progressive blueprint. trade global strength for domestic redistribution. America's spending is already approaching dangerous British levels under Biden's policies.
And one of my favorite poems is a poem by the poet Philip Larkin, a British poet who's writing in around 1960. And he wrote a poem called Homage to a Government. And it ends this way. Next year, we shall be living in a country that brought its soldiers home for lack of money. The statues will still be standing in the same tree-muffled squares and look nearly the same. Our children will not know it's a different country. All we can hope to leave them now is money.
Larkin's poem was prophetic. He saw Britain choosing welfare over warfare in 1960 and predicted national decline. Our children will not know it's a different country perfectly captures how civilizations die quietly through bureaucratic surrender rather than military defeat. Britain chose comfort over greatness.
So you don't get to come here and lecture us about that. Those are the lessons. Don't give up global leadership when you have it. Don't go wobbly. Don't give up your economic might in favor of specious nonsense like global redistributionism in the name of global warming. And hell, don't open your borders to mass migration that helps facilitate all of that. And then don't lecture us. Don't lecture your successors who have been paying your bills for the last 80 years in terms of defense. Don't do that. By the way, it is not just Great Britain, of course.
The ultimate irony. Britain lectures their military protector. America has subsidized British defense for 80 years, while they spent on socialism instead of military strength. They're living proof that abandoning global leadership, free markets, and border security leads to irrelevance. We shouldn't follow their path to decline.